Okay, so today we're going to go over the last chapters of our semesters, chapters 33, 34, 35, and 36. And the material tonight will be the last of the material that's going to be covered on your final exam. Just a couple of reminders, housekeeping, if you will. If you are opting to do extra credit, it is due before your final exam. So if you're going to be doing extra credit, you must email it to me prior to the date of your final, excuse me, prior to the date of your final exam so I can have an opportunity to actually review them, grade them, and have a point allocation. As a reminder, what is the extra credit project? If you choose to do it, you can select up to 3 chapters from the syllabus, 3 cases, I'm sorry, 3 cases from the syllabus, and you are going to make a video about the up to 3 cases. In each video, up to 5 minutes maximum, you're going to talk about the fact pattern, you're going to talk about the players, you're going to talk about the legal analysis, you're going to talk about the outcome, you're going to talk about why the court decided the way that it did. You're going to tell me whether or not you agree with that. It's got to be a maximum of 5 minutes. For 5 minutes, we'll get you a maximum of 10 points. So if you give me a 2-minute video, the most you're going to get as far as points are concerned will be 4 points. If you give me a 3-minute video, the most you'll get is 6 points. And that's if you're giving me real information. If you give me BS, or if you're cheating and you're reading from some website that has information on a case, you're going to get a 0. So don't even bother, because I'm crazy like that. I will find the sources that you used. So this is supposed to be in your own words, and it's just a video that you're going to be doing. Whether I don't care how you get it to me, but it's your responsibility to get it to me. If the date of the final exam comes, I'm not going to grade any extra credit the day of the final exam. It must be submitted prior to that final date. So according to our syllabus, your final exam is May 19th. You must submit it. The last day to submit it is May 18th. So if you're interested in extra credit, the last day to submit is May 18th. And you can email it to me. I know that in the past, some students say that because the video is big, they have some trouble uploading it or whatever. That's on you to figure it out. Whether you upload to YouTube or some other medium and then send me the link, that's fine. But you must do so, figure it all out before the 18th. That way I have some time to look at it, watch it, review it, and grade it. Your exam is going to be like your last 2 exams. Yes, Deborah, you can. You can submit. Some students have already submitted their attendance. So once you have your 10, if you want to do the 11, that's fine, and then submit it tonight. Yeah, I've been accepting them, so that's fine. Your final exam is going to be basically the same as the format that's been your first 2 exams in this class. So it's going to be some multiple choice, it's going to be some true and false, and that's pretty much it. I have not finalized the final exam yet. I wait until our last lecture, and then I go over the questions that I have. I add some new ones, I take away some old ones, and it's going to be stuff that based on things that we've covered in the class. And it's nothing tricky about it. Again, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're somewhere that you have access to internet. You have to be able to start it and finish it at that, that prescribed time. You will get your grade pretty much right then and there. Now, again, you should be able to figure out what your grade is going to be based on your first 2 exams and whether or not you've done your attendance. What I do is, as I get the attendance review sheets from you, like with your secret phrases and whatnot, I start inputting that into my spreadsheet. And that way, once I do the final exam, I can also input that in there. If you're going to do extra credit, obviously I have to calculate that in there as well. So the earlier you get me the information, the better, because then I can input everything and I can submit it to the world of CSI, because I have a certain period of time to do so. So please get me your attendance as soon as possible, extra credit as soon as possible. And that way, by the time the final exam is done, I can just input that information on my Excel spreadsheet and then upload it to CSI. That way you know where you stand in this class. Does anybody have any questions about the final exam or about attendance or about the extra credit? Does anybody have any questions about anything before we get started on today's lectures in life? No. Okay. So I'm going to continue on with the material that we've been talking about. We started last week. We're going to continue to talk about it now, which is more corporation stuff. And it is, we spoke about sole proprietorship, we spoke about some partnerships. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about corporations. And corporations are, you know what's good about corporations? The best thing about corporations is that it is a separate person. Essentially, it's treated as a separate person that can take the brunt of any liability that's incurred. And so it has its own EIN number, which is the equivalent of a social security number, and it can, be it's as if it's its own person. And so when you're putting blame on something, it's the corporation is obviously run by people, but it's considered a separate legal entity for purposes of creditors, for purposes of lawsuits. And so the persons that are running it are actually shielded from liability, and that's one of the biggest attractions of corporations. Not only that, but obviously the size of corporation can grow, whether it could be publicly traded or privately traded. And there are obviously tax benefits as well, but it's also freely transferable. So if you have a company or corporation that is a C corp that's publicly traded on the Nasdaq or in the stock exchange, you, by owning that one stock certificate, or you own a portion of that company. If you've ever seen the movie Mr. Deeds with Adam Sandler, there's a portion in there where he says, anybody watch that movie, or am I probably not? That's okay. Anyway, I like Adam Sandler and I like that movie. He goes in there at the end of the movie, and I'm not spoiling it for anyone, but he's like, I'm a stockholder. I just bought one certificate of this, so therefore I'm an owner of this company and I can speak. If you own a share of Amazon, or if you own a share of Google or Tesla or any of these companies, you are supposed to get notifications of when they have meetings, and you get the opportunity to vote your shares um, when it's time to vote on certain issues. Whether or not your particular vote based on your shares actually means anything, or whether it's going to have an impact, I don't know, but at least you have that opportunity to do so. So again, one of the more important things about the corporations is that it's a separate legal entity, it's freely transferable, and its existence can go on forever. Something I do want you to know. Oh, uprising of cryptos. Okay, so this is not going to be on your exam, but I will tell you about this because I'm recently discovering the world of cryptos. So a couple of months ago, my cousin comes over with her friend, and they start to tell me about how, like, he was able to basically pay off his entire student loans on crypto because of his investments in crypto. And I'm like, I don't understand cryptocurrency. It's nothing based on nothing. What is it? It doesn't make any sense to me, but I started looking into it and I started to dabble into it. It's scary how, yes, we give it value. Yeah, we give it value, and tons of people, millions of people are apparently giving it value. And I don't understand how, let's say Bitcoin, that's probably the most popular one, although I believe Dogecoin, if that's how you pronounce it, has also been, on the news lately, Ethereum, all these other things. So my sister actually, okay, I'm all over the place. So let me tell you. So I started looking into this stuff and I was like, you know what? Let me buy some into it. And I first started looking at Bitcoin when it was, $23,000. And I didn't do anything. I didn't buy, I didn't sell, nothing. I just was, okay, let me now look into this stupid thing. Went into like $40,000, $30,000, $50,000, $60,000. It hit a high, I think, of $64,000. I still don't understand cryptocurrency. I feel like, who is watching it? Who is monitoring it? Where, can some good hacker or team of hackers go in there and wipe it down? Possibly, yeah. I have no idea, but it is out there. And when you log into PayPal and you see an option for, using crypto to pay, it gives it legitimacy. I don't know if I mentioned to this class or the other class, I had to make a purchase recently. I purchased services from somebody who was doing an inspection on a house. And one of the ways that he said he could be paid was through Bitcoin. And so I thought that was very interesting. It seems that cryptocurrency is a lot more accepted today than it was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Whether or not that's the future, I don't know. I'm weary of those things, and it may be because I'm a little older than most of you students. So if it's not a dollar, or if it's not gold, like a bullion of gold or something, where I know that, hey, this is the set value of this thing, I don't know how comfortable. Am I gonna put my entire life savings into cryptocurrency? Absolutely not. Some people have done that and have made a ton of money. Over Easter, my Easter was this past weekend. And so my family, my immediate family got together, and my sister was telling me, we were talking about investments in cryptocurrency. And she said that in 2018, she bought $100 worth of Dogecoin, and that now it's like $16,000. And I was like, good for you. Good for you. That's awesome. That's great. So, let me see here. Let me see what you're writing, Nicole. Let's see here. Around the coin, around no agency. Yeah, it's it's and that's what I'm afraid of. Exactly. Like, there's been a lot of people that I've heard where they could not find their code or something, so they can't find, or they can't retrieve their Bitcoin because of blah blah blah. So who can you go to sue, or to find, or who do you call? Like, when you get robbed, or there's some kind of theft, you go to the police, and the DAs investigate this stuff. Is there anybody to even investigate that possibility of the loss or the theft of cryptocurrency? Hold on, Simon, go away then. If I'm too loud, go sit somewhere else. So and what's interesting about crypto and how it's going to be very difficult to monitor from a legal sense is courts have jurisdiction over particular neighborhoods, of particular cities, of particular areas, right? Cryptocurrencies bought and sold all over the world. So how can you make a purchase, you make it, and then try to um, sue somebody or try to get something from somebody on the other side of the world? Ali, you're on not unmuted, so I'm gonna mute you because you're distracting me. So it's interesting. It's a very interesting, unless there's going to be some kind of worldwide police department or some kind of agency to track it, or to uh help people recover the theft of it. It's not something I would feel comfortable putting it in there. And until those things are in place, I don't know. Go. Um, I don't know. I'm curious to see what the future holds. So totally off topic, but that's my take on cryptocurrency. Okay. When we talk about, reverting back to our lectures, when we talk about publicly held or privately held, this is something I want you to know for the exam. So companies, corporations can either be publicly held or privately held. And when we talk about companies, generally speaking, publicly held companies, corporations are like government entities that, or have some kind of government purposes, and privately held are 90 to 95% of companies. They are for the purpose of what? Having a business, having profit. Now we're going to just concentrate on these privately held companies, so private businesses. And when you have a private business can either be, again, it could be publicly held or closely held. And this is actually what I want you to know for the exam and for life. Most companies that are private are closely held companies. And what a closely held company is, it's a finite number of people, and it's usually just, a couple of friends that are doing a business, or a family that's doing a business. It's the mom and pop store that you see everywhere that you go. If you're from Staten Island, you go down Forest Avenue, Highland Boulevard, all those restaurants, all those companies, all those stores, they're businesses, right? And so if there are a corporation or an LLC, they are closely held. So a closely held company, a closely held corporation, is a couple of people. It's a finite number of people. Whereas a publicly held company, corporation, those are the ones that are publicly traded on the floor, where you, as somebody who has no relationship whatsoever to the company's founders, owners, board, you can go and you can purchase a stock, 100, whatever, and then you become an owner of it. Most entities are actually closely held, right? They're not available for the public to be trading. So that's the difference between a closely held and a publicly held. This is now listening, not writing. I mean, you can if you want to. There's also, when you have a corporation, there's different ways for it to be taxed. There's something called an S, like you can be taxed as an S corporation or a C corporation. And that really is that's in relation to taxes. S corps, S as in Sam, corps, are again usually a little bit smaller, under 100 people that are going to be owners of this, and they don't anticipate, worldwide domination, perhaps. So, and the income is only taxed at the individual shareholder, and it could only be domestic. A C corp, it could be domestic, it could be international, more than 100 people. It's also just uh, a larger, more complex entity. A professional corporation, maybe you've seen entities that, end their name with a comma, PC, and that just means it's a professional corporation. And a professional corporation is simply a corporation where the partners, or the people that are practicing it, they have a license to practice. So it could be a medical office, could be a legal office. They have to have a license in order to have that designation, a license by the state. So that's a PC, a professional corporation. Now, how do you form a corporation? That same website I gave you last week for the DOS, you can go there and you just, click on what do you want to do. I want to form a corporation, and you fill out the paperwork. It's like 3 pages, very, very minimal. And you file it, the articles of incorporation, with the state, and you pay the filing fee, and now you can have a corporation. Again, there's no requirement that you have your bylaws or articles of organization, which is a little bit different, filed anywhere, but I always recommend having bylaws or having some kind of way to something in writing on how you're deciding to manage your business, especially if it's with another person or a group of people, simply because it opens up that conversation, and it allows you, as potential partners, to see where each of you stand and what would happen to the entity if a problem arises. So you're anticipating possible conflicts or possible situations. You're discussing it amongst yourselves rationally before that situation arises, and coming up with a way to resolve those issues. And again, that is not filed anywhere, but it's something as an internal document, which I always recommend. So the only thing you actually have to file for a corporation is the articles of incorporation. Bylaws don't have to be filed anywhere. And that's basically it. So bylaws, regulations are just internal management of the company you keep to yourself. The last thing I'm going to talk about for this chapter is a concept called piercing the corporate veil. And I had spoken about the way that a corporation is a separate entity that prevents creditors from actually getting at people directly. The only time a person who is a director or a member, like a high ranking person, can be held liable for actions is if it's through this theory called piercing the corporate veil. And you're allowed to do that when there's like gross negligence, or when people are using the corporation as a front to evade something really bad, or they're doing these bad things that it would not be fair for them to use the corporation as a front to protect them from, paying liability or going to jail possibly. So the purpose of this concept called piercing the corporate veil is to protect the public, to prevent fraud, and to not have people circumvent the law. So piercing the corporate veil, this is a write it down moment. Piercing the corporate veil, it's for public policy, basically to protect the public, prevent fraud, and not have people circumvent the law. So that's what allows somebody to sue an individual in a corporation who would otherwise say, you can't sue me, sue the corporation. It pierces that corporate veil and allows you to get at the people directly if they're doing something bad. Does anybody have any questions on anything in chapter 33? Okay. Chapter 34. This next sentence, I want you to write it down exactly, because this is something I usually test on. So write this exactly as I say it. Corporations finance most of their operations through debt securities. Through debt securities. One more time. Corporations finance most of their operations through debt securities. So what does that mean in English? It means that a corporation doesn't necessarily need to have a ton of cash on hand. They just have like these kind of IOUs, or these debts that they owe other entities or other third parties until they're able to bring in business, or until they're able to make money on their product, and then they go ahead and pay their creditors. This is the next thing, also something I want you to know. What are blue sky laws? Blue sky laws, so this is, write it down. Blue sky laws prohibit fraud in the sale of securities. Now this is listening stuff. When we talk about corporations, you probably think about owning shares in the corporation, right? That's how you have some kind of ownership interest. You own a share or two or 10 or 100 in a particular business entity. And so what happens is when you own shares in a company, you're allowed to do three things. You're allowed to participate in the control, you're allowed to participate in the earnings of the corporation, and you're allowed to participate in the residual assets of the corporation upon dissolution. Which means, like, when the company now has to dissolve, you'll get something possibly, or you'll vote on what's going to happen to the assets after they paid off their debt. So when you own shares, you should have a say in these types of things. And again, if any of you have owned shares in entities, maybe you get those emails that say, okay, you can either vote or you can have a proxy vote. Here are the questions. You click on this link and attend this meeting for this entity and vote on the next board of directors or the next president and vice president of the corporation. The board of directors recommends A, B, and C. Perhaps you've gotten those emails, perhaps not. I don't know. So when you own shares of a corporation, you're usually involved in some type of control, even if it's minimal, of the entity itself. A company or corporation can only issue shares that are actually written in the articles of a corporation and that are filed with the state. And if you're going to be amending that, or you're going to be changing how many shares an entity can actually issue, you would just amend that with the state, and then you can issue out more shares. Don't forget, when you issue out new shares of an entity, you're diluting the shares that the existing people have. So you companies are a little bit careful with doing that, but that's how sometimes you bring in more money, by allowing more shares out there. When you look at the stock market or the stock exchange, as one of my former colleagues used to always say, the stock exchange, all it is I own, 5 shares of Tesla. I'm deciding to sell them. Who am I selling them to? Somebody else out there decides they want to buy 5 shares and they buy them. It's not like there's new shares created by Tesla. It's the same thing as going back and forth between people. And it just really depends on how much somebody's willing to pay for a particular share. It's the same company in the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, but you can see sometimes the volatility of the share costs per person. And the shares of a company can drastically change in a 24-hour period. Forget that, even an 8-hour period, right? Depending on the news of some catastrophe that's happening in the world, or if the stock exchange feels that it's not stable, at some part of the world, or even in the United States, or the interest rates are going to change. So that affects the stock market, or some kind of anticipated news is going to happen. There's a lot of also um, you know, places where you have to be careful, because sometimes you'll see a stock go up and up and up and up, and then all of a sudden it comes crashing down. Well, that could be the ploy of the pump and dump scheme, which is, brokers or whatnot, or people, or companies or brokerage firms or whatever, they buy a stock, the stock value goes up, they keep buying it, then other people, the I don't want to say the suckers like you and I, but the common folks see a stock that's possibly going up. Hey, let's get in on this. This is a stock that's doing really well. I don't think it's, I don't know if illegal, I don't know the legality of it, Jessica. I know that it's something that happens that should not, but I don't know whether or not it's illegal, and that's probably something for the Securities Exchange to kind of monitor and see. I don't know how they could prove it, but there's probably ways to track it down. But I'm not going to comment as to whether or not it's legal or not, because I don't know. So we buy into this, and now the people, the original pumpers, all right, they've made their money, they're making good money. You and I are already in, they sell everything, the stock value comes crashing down, and guess what? We've lost a lot of money if we sell, and somebody out there made a ton of money. So I I'm not giving you advice, especially because this is recorded now and it's on the worldwide internet. So I don't give advice when it comes to financials, but I do say, if you are going to purchase stocks, or dabble in the stock market, dabble in stocks or companies that you believe in, that you might be in for the long haul, that pay off dividends. That way, regardless of what the stock value is today, tomorrow, next week, you're at least getting paid off dividends. Also, remember that there are tax implications if you buy a stock today and sell it next week. You'll actually pay a lot more in taxes if you're making money than if you were to keep it for a year. So if you hold on to taxes for more than a year, I believe you pay about 15% tax. But if you sell it in less than a year, you pay 40% taxes on the money that you make. So you want to be careful of that. Always speak to an accountant. Again, I am not an authority on this whatsoever. As a matter of fact, again, my former boss and mentor, he used to tell me that I'm like the kiss of death when it comes to stocks, because every time I bought a stock that he had, it would start decreasing in value. And every time I would sell a stock, it would increase in value. So they were always trying to get me to sell the things I had so they could go back in value. So I suck. Don't listen to my stock advice. I just try to give you some tidbits on things I've learned the hard way. All right. What are preemptive rights? So sometimes preemptive rights are a shareholder's right who already owns, this is listening, shareholder's right to purchase when there is a new stock offering at a pro rata price. That way you can keep your original um, percentage, if you will, of what the company actually is. And preemptive rights are usually available when it's a closely held company. And I'll give you an example. Let's say it's a small mom and pop shop and there's 4 people that own it. I own 25%, you each own 25% of it. So each one of us owns 2.5 shares. Or let's make it easier, 100 shares each. We want to bring in a fifth partner. If a fifth partner comes in, I still want to be able to possibly, own 25%. But if I don't get a chance, or I'm sorry, if we own 100 each, so we are effectively 25% shareholders. If the company is going to issue out another 100 shares, so there's going to be 500 shares, perhaps I want to purchase an additional 25 of those new shares that are coming out so I could retain my 25% ownership of this company. Otherwise, a new person comes in and now my ownership interest has been reduced from 25% to 20%. So preemptive rights really just allows the original shareholders the ability to purchase additional shares so they can keep their interest the same. When we talk about par value of a stock, that simply means the value of a stock. What's the stock actually worth? When we talk about classes of shares, so there's something called common stocks and sometimes something called preferred stocks. The only example I know, and I'm sure there's more out there, but only because I bought and sold this one, is a stock, and you can look it up if you have Yahoo Finance, or if you Google it, I guess you could find it as well. So this company called Royal Dutch, its initials on the stock market is I think it's RDS. RDS, Royal Dutch. It's a gas company. Like they provide gas to like Shell and all that stuff. So they actually have 2 different stocks, RDSA and RDSB. One of them is higher in price than the other. It's because one of them is a preferred stock and one of them is a common stock. And what that means is the preferred stocks are a little bit more expensive, but they get their dividends first. They have sometimes better voting ability. They have a right to share in the assets like the common, but if there was some kind of dissolution that was ever to happen, they would get their money first based on their ownership interest than the common stock. So that's just different classes of shares. The next concept is a concept that may sound familiar to you, and it's the concept of dividends. Dividends are money that the company gives out to its shareholders on a regular basis, usually at set intervals, usually quarterly, where you'll get something. And if you look up stocks, again, on Yahoo Finance or any of the companies out there, you'll see what the percent that they actually give off as dividends. And so when you buy a company that has dividends, you're getting money every quarter just by virtue of having that stock. So you own this one stock, you'll get residual income from it by doing nothing, just by holding on to it. So dividends are a good way to kind of build up your portfolio if you have stocks that have these dividends. Usually they're reputable companies, but not always. The next topic, the next case is actually about dividends. So who would like to tell us about this case? It is a case I usually test on. So definitely make sure to know it. And that's Dodge versus Ford. Who wants to tell us about Dodge versus Ford?
I could talk about it, Professor.
Go ahead, Jessica.
So Ford Company was making really strong profits for years. Henry Ford had declared that moving forward, it was no longer going to pay special dividends to its shareholders, and that instead it was going to reinvest those profits for proposed company expansions. Two shareholders, brothers John and Horace Dodge, brought action against Ford to compel that the dividends continue to be paid and to forbid the expansion efforts. They complained that this wasn't best for the business or their investors and that it was kind of arbitrary on behalf of the board of directors. The judge did end up siding with Dodge, and the dividends were required to be paid out at a fixed number. Though it's not technically a violation for companies to accumulate profits for reinvestment, their refusal to pay dividends despite their excessive surplus in their profits was deemed arbitrary.
Very good. And do you know what the Dodge brothers did when they got their dividends?
They started Dodge.
They started Dodge. That's right. That's how Dodge was started. The amount of dividends that they were getting was an insane amount. I mean, it was a tremendous amount. And so I guess that's why the court said that, listen, you can, invest, but to kind of make that decision to not pay off your shareholders, maybe that's not best. I don't know if that was the right decision.
I was going to say, because it did say that typically the judicial system doesn't really get involved. They kind of leave the board of directors to, but it was like, especially for the time, because it was like the early 1900s, the required fixed amount that they paid out to their investors was like 19 million or something. It was like some crazy number for that time. There was really no reason for them to all of a sudden cut dividends and say, oh, we need it for expansions, when they were making that much money.
No, it was sometimes you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and perhaps this was looked at as a way to prevent a monopoly of Ford on the industry, that they were going to expand and expand and expand, and it was going to make it very difficult for any other car company to start. Usually courts do not intervene in business decisions because of something called the business judgment rule, which I think we're going to be speaking about a little later tonight. But I'm going to tell you now because I don't want to forget. So the business judgment rule, because it's something I always test on, the business judgment rule basically says as long as you try your best, you can't be sued. So if there was a good reason that a business or board decides that they want to do something that wasn't malicious, that there was no negligence on or fraud or anything like that, the courts really should not be intervening in what the company wants to do. So that's the business judgment rule. And so for Dodge versus Ford, that's the outcome. That's what happened. Whether or not I agree with it from a legal standpoint, it doesn't really matter, but at least you have that. Very good. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, that's it for chapter 34. We're going to move on to chapter 35. Okay, chapter 35 talks about the management structure of corporations. So there are a couple of there's three different types of players in a corporation. You have the board of directors, you have shareholders, and you have officers. So I'm going to tell you what each of them does and how they interact with one another. The board of directors is the one that guides the ship, if you will. Hold on one second. I'm going to just. So the board of directors steers the ship. They make the big decisions to decide how the company is going to be managed or what decisions they're going to be made. Are they going to be investing in this? Or are they going to be investing in that? Major decisions. The officers do the day-to-day. They carry on the day-to-day tasks of a corporation. And the shareholders are the ones that elect the board of directors. They're the ones that own pieces of that company, right? The board of directors hires the officers. So board of directors, again, manages the big picture. The officers do the day-to-day, and the shareholders are the ones that financially support the corporation. Generally speaking, when you have a closely held company, the board of directors and the shareholders and the officers could all be the same group of people. So it's going to be like one person wearing multiple hats, because it's only a couple of people that are forming the entity anyway. So they all do different things. When we talk about corporations again, in order for a corporation to have that shield of liability, it has to act and conduct itself in a formal manner. And that's actually very hard to do for closely held companies because of the familiarity they have with one another. It's a family, it's a group of friends, so they want to just do things all, nice and chill because they know each other very well. But when you start to lose formality, you're eroding the protection that the corporation has. So you have to have those formalities in place in order for that protection to remain there. When we talk about voting, typically speaking, every shareholder gets one vote, unless the articles of incorporation say otherwise. And voting happens when the annual meeting, the annual shareholders meeting, it happens if there's a special reason to have a vote also. Quorum is usually discussed in the bylaws, but what quorum is and how that interplays with voting is you need to have what quorum is. It's you need to have the minimum number of people present in order to carry on any business transaction. So let's say we have 10 board of directors. This is something you need to know and understand because I usually give you a scenario on your exam that you have to be able to figure out. So if you have 10 directors on your board and your bylaws say that you need to have a simple majority in order to effectuate quorum, what's a simple majority of 10, the 10 board of directors?
6.
Thank you, 6. And in order to actually pass a vote, you need to have a simple majority of that. What's a simple majority of 6?
4.
Correct. So you could have a board of directors comprised of 10 people, yet 4 are deciding the path of the organization. And that's what happens when people are not there. And to give you a very simple example, I'm on the board of directors for the Richmond County Bar Association. Yesterday, Tuesday, we had a meeting, and there was a motion that came up. It was tied 8-8. I had abstained because the topic involves really the private practitioners, and I work for the state, so I didn't want to vote one way or the other, and there was one other person that abstained. Had we voted, perhaps the motion would have passed because it failed yesterday. That was the first time that I had seen a motion actually fail. Usually when it's made, it's overwhelmingly in favor or opposed to a particular action. There was also a number of people that did not show up at yesterday's meeting. So if one person showed up, or me or my other colleague had voted, a motion could have passed. You are effectuating where the organization is going to go. And that's why I always stress the importance of voting, whether it's in a corporation or an election. Every vote, I certainly believe every vote counts. And when everybody kind of says, oh, my vote doesn't matter. No. Your vote matters, and your vote can have an impact on the trajectory of where a company goes or who gets voted into office. So always know and understand these types of things, especially when we talk about voting in a corporation. How do you elect, or when do you elect the directors? It's usually at the annual meeting. How do you remove directors? That's usually done when a special meeting is called, if there's a specific reason for it. And the bylaws will say, what you need in order to remove a vote, a director out. So it could potentially be a simple majority. It could be a 2/3 majority. It could be a 5/6, whatever it is your bylaws say, that's what's going to be. Maybe it's unanimous in order to pass something. I don't know. But that's why that stuff is written in your bylaws. What is a proxy? A proxy is when you give somebody else the ability to vote your shares or your vote at a meeting. So let's say you cannot be present for whatever reason, you make so and so your proxy, they can vote on your behalf. You can discuss with them how you want them to vote, or you can say to them, I trust that you will vote how I would vote. And so you give a blanket ability to vote in that respect. Um, The next case I want you to know for the exam is Gawler versus Gawler. Who read it and is able to tell us about it?
I can talk about it. This one was a little confusing, but I can try.
Okay. Did anybody else besides Jessica read? Shame. For shame. Anybody want to tell us about Gawler versus Gawler besides Jessica? Okay, Jessica, the floor is yours.
Okay, so Gawler and Gawler were brothers. They owned a wholesale drug company and they decided to incorporate their business. They were equal partners in a closed corporation and they split their shares evenly between the two of them. Years later, they entered into a written agreement that should one brother pass away, their immediate families would inherit their half of the company. Parties would also vote for directors, so that way the heirs would have the same representation as the deceased shareholder. A couple years later, one of the brothers, Benjamin, died, and his widow, I believe her name was Emma, sought that the agreement would be honored by the surviving brother, Isidore, but he refused and wanted the terms of the agreement to be changed. They went to court, and Emma initially won, and then Isidore took it to the appellate court, and then the decision was reversed. But that's why I didn't really understand that, because she was.
And then she appealed.
Did it
And
go to the
then she
Supreme
won.
Court?
Yeah, it went all the way up.
Oh,
So the
okay.
trial court, she sued, she won, brother appealed, he won, she appealed, and she won. So ultimately she won
Okay.
because
She had half the shares. I even ended up watching another video to try to understand it, and he literally put the shares like in a trust for her and everything.
yeah,
So it could, like
no,
go
no,
to her.
exactly. It was clear that the intention of the business owners was for, if one of them died, the surviving spouse or whoever the next heir at law was to get it. So the court had said these people, these business owners had decided this. They entered into an agreement. There's absolutely no reason to invalidate the agreement. Therefore, she, as a surviving spouse, as the next of kin, as whatever, is the rightful heir. And she actually won. So she was able to keep half the shares.
The
Very good.
company. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think the surviving brother ended up arguing it like violated like policy law and state law, and I was like,
Yeah, it
I
was all
don't
BS.
even. It
Doesn't
sounded like
understand.
BS.
Yeah, it was a contract. The two entities, two people decided this is what they wanted to do. There was no fraud. There was no duress. It was properly executed.
It
It
was
was
a
a
written
proper
agreement.
contract. It was written. There was no reason to overturn it. Like, that's why people make agreements, so they can have something to fall back on.
Yeah, I
Excellent.
didn't know she ultimately ended up winning. I was
Yeah.
confused why he ended up winning the appeal because it just didn't
Yeah.
make
No,
sense.
no.
But she won in the end, so that makes
She
sense.
won in the end. Exactly. She won in the end. Excellent. Very good. Okay. So shareholders can actually sue the companies, right? So they can actually sue and enforce their rights as shareholders. And when they do that, they have a right, every shareholder has a right to obtain information. They have a right to sue the corporation directly or sue on behalf of the corporation. And I'm going to get into that a little more in a second. And they also have a right to dissent, means they have a right to disagree with what the company, the board of directors is going. When we say that a shareholder has the right to sue the corporation directly or sue on behalf of the corporation, that's something called either a direct suit or a derivative suit. And when you have a direct suit brought by the shareholders, it means that the shareholders are suing the corporation based on their ownership interest, like the Dodge versus Ford. They, as shareholders, sued the corporation to take on a particular act. A derivative suit is when a shareholder says, hey, corporation, you were supposed to sue or, get these rights or do something and you're not doing it. Therefore, I'm a shareholder. I'm going to sue on you on your behalf as the corporation. So the shareholder says, I'm going to be the corporation. I'm going to sue this third party, which the corporation should have done. So a derivative suit is different than a direct suit. It places the shareholder in different positions, but it allows them to, again, nonetheless effectuate some type of lawsuit, whether it's for the benefit of the shareholders or it's the corporation suing somebody else, which was ultimately also for the benefit of the shareholders. Because as the corporation makes money, who makes money? It's the shareholders, because their value of their asset goes up. Don't forget that the board of directors is fiduciaries. So they have a duty to the corporation, they have a duty to do what's best in the corporation. They have a duty to act in good faith. Again, not screw the corporation, not do anything behind its back. Their purpose is to grow the corporation and the entity. Um, a board can meet as frequently or infrequently as their bylaws or as they decide. Um, and then one individual, like one member of the board, can't bind the corporation, but the board itself as a whole definitely binds the corporation with the actions that they take. Officers are agents of the corporation, so they do whatever the corporation tells them, and it's the board of directors that selects the officers. So in a way, the officers basically take their guidance from the board of directors. Generally speaking, officers get compensated for their work. Generally speaking, the board of directors do not. They just, it's like a voluntary thing, so they can give back or whatnot. But I don't know if that's the same when it comes to like big companies. I know that at every board I have served on, it's been, free. So generally speaking, you just want to give back to the community. And so you don't take compensation for that. The business judgment rule, I already spoke about, but I'll say it again. And it's essentially, as long as you try your best, you can't be sued. As long as you're taking actions in good faith and you're really trying to do what's best for the company, even if the outcome is not ideal, you cannot be sued for that because you tried your best. Indemnification basically means that an officer or a director can be indemnified for actions, again, as long as they were acting in good faith. So if they have expenses that they've paid out, they can get reimbursed for those expenses. If there's going to be a lawsuit that it's involved them, the company, the corporation should foot the legal bill as long as that person was acting in good faith on behalf of the company. That's everything I want you to know for chapter 35. Before I go on to 36, I'm going to give you the phrase for tonight. So if you do not have enough phrases tonight, this is your phrase. It is, tonight I bid thee farewell. Tonight I bid thee farewell is your secret phrase for the evening. One more time. Tonight I bid thee farewell. Okay, we're going to move on to chapter 36. And there's actually only one thing I want you to know on chapter 36. And that's why I had to do the secret phrase before I forgot. So chapter 36, the only thing I want you to know is the concept of merger. And a merger is simply a combination of two or more corporations. Hold on. Yes, Christopher. My son said like Cunard and White Star Line merged in the 1930s. Those are two ship companies. Yes. So merger is two or more corporations that are merging to now become one. Their assets are combined, and their debts are combined and whatnot. If a shareholder does not agree to the merger, they can always just be paid out and then, do something else. They can just get out of it. So a merger is a combination of two or more business entities. The surviving corporation gets title to everything. They change it all, the assets, and everything kind of falls under that new entity. If you're from Staten Island, you know that there was a merger between two banks, financial institutions, Northfield and Victory. So if you were a person of Victory State Bank, you no longer have Victory State Bank. You now have Northfield because Northfield bought out Victory State Bank. They took their locations, they have their staff. I think they retained most of their staff. The account numbers are basically all the same, but it's all now under Northfield. And with that said, I will leave you with a couple of words to end the evening because, again, next week I'm going to sign on at 6:30. So if you have any questions as you're studying for the exam, if there's any topic you want to discuss, you can sign on next week and I will be happy to answer any and all questions. The exam, once again, is going to be a combination of multiple choice and true and false. If you're interested in extra credit, please have it before May 19th. So the last day to submit is May 18th. The sooner the better. You have up to 3 cases maximum, or you can do 1, you can do 2, or you can do none. It's whatever you want. That's for the extra credit if you feel like you need it. The attendance phrases, you can email them to me if you've completed it. And in case you do not show up next week and you sign on the week after for the final exam, I I like to tell all my classes this. I like to pass on this wisdom, which is try to do good in life. Try to participate and be an active participant in life. Help those around you. It does not hurt. Be respectful of people around you and always try to improve yourself. It is so it's easy to climb if you just put the work and effort into it. And I say it because I look back at where I was born, where I came from, and my upbringing, and I'm happy to say that I am where I am, but I have hustled my entire life. I've worked extremely hard, and I implore young people to do the same. If you're looking for opportunities, at least in the legal field, contact me as a reference, contact me for guidance. I'm always happy to kind of pay it forward and help students out in that respect. I get a lot of students that reach out to me, a year, 2, 5 years after they've taken this class. I may not remember you specifically, but if you tell me that you were a student in, Business Law 160, at least we'll have that initial conversation. If you're interested in the law and you're interested in law school, certainly feel free to reach out to me. Or I know you have a legal studies department in the school because I work with them a lot. So you reach out to them. I think the president right now is Maxwell. Michael Paris is the faculty advisor who I've worked with in the past on many occasions. But really, don't half-ass things. I think when you do that, you really shortchange yourself. So give it all you got, and that way you won't have any regrets. If you give it your all and you fail, that's okay, but just try. Um, and network like crazy, because networking will get you to places. Sometimes you need to be at the right place at the right time, or have those connections, or know somebody that could help you. There's no shame in that. It's what you do of something once you get that position, once you get that internship. For those of you who ever, do internships are extremely valuable, extremely important. And the reason I say that is you get to put yourself out there, and people will see who you are, the type of work ethic you have. I have helped many interns who came to the court for free. I've helped them secure jobs, paying jobs. And there are interns that I will never write a letter of recommendation for because they sucked as human beings, right? So if you come in or don't come in at all and you have a bad attitude and you're always complaining and you don't do your work and it's an internship, what makes you think that employer would ever hire you or give you a letter of recommendation? I do not sugarcoat things, and I'm certainly not known for sugarcoating things. I've made people cry in the past, but I tell you these things to your face so you know it, because those are the things that people say behind your back. Be involved in your community. If you live on Staten Island, there's so many opportunities to get involved. There's so many opportunities to help out. So if you're looking for something to do in the summer, maybe you want to volunteer for an organization, whether it's political or charitable, but do something. It'll be good on your resume and you'll feel good that you're actually like helping out or being proactive in life. You never know where life is going to take you. So I'm always also a proponent of saying yes. Any opportunity that knocks on your door, say yes and take it, because you got nothing else to lose, right? You're it's like your home. What else are you doing, right? So take on the opportunities, learn, do well, and be good and kind to people. I'm always available as a resource. So if you have any questions, shoot me an email. We can always talk privately afterwards. With that said, young people, I bid thee farewell. Have a great evening, and perhaps I'll see you next week. If not, good luck on your final exams.
Have a good night, Professor.
Good
Thank you,
night.
Professor. Have a good
You're welcome.
night.
Good night.
Thank you, Professor.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.